Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is to get you fluent on complex topics pretty fast, turning dense research into clear, memorable insights.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, we are undertaking a critical and, well, frankly, a very sensitive dive into traumatic brain injury, TBI, focusing specifically on the acute role of alcohol use right at the time of injury.
And TBI, I mean, it's a huge crisis in the United States. It impacts over 1 million people every year.
1 million? Wow.
Yeah, and causes more than 50,000 deaths annually. It's just a massive societal cost.
Yeah.
So for you, the listener, understanding the factors that sort of modulate risk is really essential.
Absolutely. Our sources today give us this spectacular long-view snapshot of the issue. We're working with data from an 18-year retrospective study that's 1992 through 2009, examining neurotrauma data from Pennsylvania. And crucially, they focused only on moderate to severe TBI cases.
The really serious injuries.
Exactly, measured by the Glasgow Coma Scale. So the ones needing significant medical attention.
So, okay, our goal for this deep dive is pretty clear then. First, we need to map the risk. Like, who is this person suffering an alcohol-positive TBI? What do they look like demographically?
Right, who's most vulnerable?
Second, we track the trends. Have public health efforts actually worked over those 2 decades? Did we see any changes?
That's a big question.
And finally, we address what is, I think, the most intriguing question. How did acute alcohol consumption, right then, actually influence the patient's outcome, their immediate outcome upon discharge?
Okay, let's start with just the sheer magnitude here. Out of nearly 12,000 moderate to severe TBI cases examined in this data set, I mean, the snapshot of risk is massive, almost half.
Almost half, yeah. 47.69% of all those patients admitted to the emergency department had alcohol in their system at the time of admission.
That is a profound figure.
It really is, and it immediately makes you ask, okay, who exactly is walking into the ED with these alcohol-related injuries?
Let's try and characterize that high-risk demographic first. When we look at demographics, gender stands out immediately. Men made up over 70% of all TBI cases in the study.
70%. Huge majority.
Yeah.
And not only were men suffering the vast majority of the injuries, but they were significantly more likely to be intoxicated at the time, alcohol positive.
What were the numbers on that?
Over half, like 54% of the men in the study were alcohol positive, compared to roughly a third, about 32% of the women.
Okay.
This kind of echoes what we see consistently in research on substance involvement and traumatic injury. It's a known pattern.
So gender is one clear line, age is the next huge dividing line, and the data paints a very specific danger zone. And it's interesting, the highest risk group isn't necessarily the youngest adults, right?
Not the absolute youngest, no.
What were those high-risk rates we saw for people in their 30s and 40s?
That cohort.
Yeah.
So individuals aged 31 to 50 years, they had the highest alcohol-positive TBI rate. It was clocking in near 60%.
60%.
Yeah. The 18 to 30-year-olds followed pretty closely behind, around 57%.
Still very high.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what's truly revealing, though, is the contrast. When you look at individuals aged 71 years and older.
Big difference there.
Massive difference. The rate of alcohol involvement just plummets to less than 14%.
Wow.
So the risk is highly, highly concentrated in that working age population, particularly the 31 to 50 bracket.
Okay, so we have a picture of who. Let's pivot now to how the injury occurred. Looking at the mechanism of injury, or MOI, the type of injury most likely to involve alcohol was assault. Over 60% of those cases tested positive.
60% for assault, yeah. TBI resulting from motor vehicle accidents, or MVA, was next at about 51%.
Okay.
And falls had the lowest rate of alcohol involvement, though still significant, around 40%.
40% is still quite high, yeah. But here's the crucial nuance. The source material really hammers home, while assault had the highest percentage of alcohol involvement.
Right, the rate was highest there.
MVA, motor vehicle accidents, had the highest total number of alcohol-positive TBI cases.
Exactly. And you have to ask why, right?
Yeah, why is that?
It's because MVA was the massive, dominant volume driver for traumatic injuries overall. It accounted for nearly 60% of all TBI cases in the study, alcohol or not.
Okay, got it.
So MVA, even with a slightly lower rate of alcohol involvement than assault, is contributing the highest raw count of acute alcohol-related TBI cases coming into the hospital system.
Yeah.
Just sheer numbers.
Right. That makes sense. If we overlay that on the 24-hour cycle of risk, this reinforces that volume correlation. The data describes a pretty classic predictable pattern, doesn't it?
Alcohol-positive TBI rates, they dip late morning, early afternoon,
Okay.
and then sharply increase late evening, early morning,
Yeah.
peaking dramatically between midnight and 4 a.m.
That's the danger zone.
That's the typical high-risk window we often think about.
Right.
But there's a nuance.
Okay.
That's the global pattern, yes. But the study highlighted an interesting age-related nuance regarding MVA specifically.
For motor vehicle
Oh,
accidents.
the risk for alcohol-positive TBI due to MVA actually increases earlier in the day for that 31 to 50-year-old demographic.
Earlier than the midnight to 4 a.m. peak.
Yeah, earlier than you see for the 18 to 30 group's peak MVA risk.
What does that earlier risk window suggest about their circumstances? Maybe compared to the younger group. It kind of paints a different picture of context, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests that for the younger group, 18 to 30, the risk aligns more with traditional weekend, late-night social hours, maybe parties, bars closing.
Okay.
But for the middle-age cohort, 31 to 50, that earlier spike, it might reflect consumption related more to post-work activities, maybe happy hour or early evening social events.
Different lifestyles, different risk timings.
Exactly. So if you're targeting prevention, you can't just look globally. You have to look at when the risk peaks for specific groups and specific mechanisms.
Fascinating. Okay, shifting gears now, let's look at trends across those 18 years of data, 1992 to 2009. The overall proportion of alcohol-positive TBI, did it change much?
Overall, it remained generally stable throughout the study period. Pretty consistent percentage overall.
Okay, so no major shift overall.
But if you drill down, you do see some evidence, some encouraging signs that public awareness campaigns and maybe policy changes actually can work.
Oh, really? Where did they see improvements?
Well, what's encouraging is the positive downward trend they observed in specific injury mechanisms. Both MVA and falls showed declining rates of alcohol involvement over time.
Okay, so fewer alcohol-related MVAs and falls towards the end of the study period.
Exactly. And when you look at age, the rates decreased significantly among individuals aged 18 to 30.
The younger group again?
Yep. And also among the 71 years and older group.
Interesting. But stable for the middle groups.
Right. The middle-age groups, 3150 and 5170, their rates remain pretty stable.
So it seems like prevention efforts, maybe directed at young adults, were paying off, at least in terms of these acute TBI incidents.
That's what it looks like. And the study directly links the decrease in MVA-related TBI in that 1830 age group to targeted interventions and policy shifts.
Like what specifically?
Specifically, they mentioned the 2003 Pennsylvania law that lowered the legal blood alcohol concentration limit, the BAC limit, from 0.10% down to 0.08%.
Ah, okay. A concrete policy change.
Yeah, and the timing fits the trend they saw in the data for that age group and MVAs. It's pretty strong support for the efficacy of those kinds of policy decisions.
That's actually really good news.
It is. The key takeaway here is that while the overall problem is persistent, focused, policy-driven successes are absolutely possible. You can mitigate specific risk factors like impaired driving among young adults.
Okay. Now, here's where it gets really complicated and, frankly, challenges a lot of common sense assumptions. We are moving into the third segment, the relationship between acute alcohol use and acute patient outcome.
Right. And this has always been a point of ambiguity in the medical literature. It's messy. Well, some studies have found, decreased mortality associated with acute alcohol exposure in trauma patients. Others have found no relationship at all, or even higher rates of complications and mortality. There's just never been a clear consensus.
So the research is all over the place on this.
Pretty much.
Okay, so bearing that ambiguity in mind, before we get to the specific outcome finding in this study, I have to kind of pause here. We are talking about moderate to severe TBI. These are serious head injuries.
Yes, very serious.
Yet the sources present a finding that just goes completely against what I think many people, including myself, would assume. What exactly did this data say about survival rates for the intoxicated patients versus the non-intoxicated ones? Did they do better?
Okay, yeah. Brace yourself. This study found a very consistent, statistically significant result. Patients who were alcohol positive had higher rates of survival compared to patients who were alcohol negative. Higher survival. The rate of intoxication, the percentage of patients who were plus ATBI, was much higher among the survivors than it was among the fatalities.
That is surprising.
It is, and it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
They also measured functional status at discharge, or FSD. This basically assesses a patient's independence, across areas like feeding, locomotion, social interaction, right when they leave the trauma center.
Right, how well they're functioning when they leave.
And again, Alcohol-positive patients consistently had better mean FSD scores. They seemed, on average, more independent upon leaving the hospital.
Okay, this is the really critical finding then.
It is. And this association held even after they statistically controlled for injury severity.
Meaning?
Meaning they compared patients who had similar levels of initial injury severity, similar GCS scores, and the intoxicated patients still showed better functional status at discharge.
Wow.
They even reran the analysis excluding the most severe cases, the intubated patients, just to be sure, and the positive relationship still held. Better outcomes associated with alcohol.
So we absolutely have to ask, why? I mean, why would acute intoxication correlate with better acute survival and functional status scores after a severe TBI? It just seems backwards.
It does seem backwards on the surface. The study acknowledges this complexity and suggests it points towards subtle protective effects.
Protective effects from alcohol.
Potentially. They reference animal literature that points to alcohol possibly acting as an immunomodulator.
Immunomodulator, what does that mean in this context?
It means it might change or regulate the body's immune response. So acute alcohol exposure before the injury has been associated in some animal models with decreased neuroinflammation, less swelling and inflammation in the brain post-injury, and also with increased survival rates in those animal models. The idea is maybe alcohol dampens the body's initial, very strong and sometimes harmful inflammatory response to the trauma.
So like it tones down the body's overreaction to the injury.
That's the hypothesis suggested by some of the background literature, yeah. The sort of biological buffer.
That's a truly fascinating potential mechanism. But, okay, we have to be extremely careful here. We cannot just say alcohol is good for TBI. That's clearly not the message.
Absolutely not.
We need to raise some critical thinking points around potential biases or other explanations for this finding.
Definitely. And the study authors themselves point these out. One point is about complication rates during the hospital stay.
Okay.
The alcohol-negative TBI patients, the ones without alcohol, had significantly higher rates of complications while in the hospital. About 43% of them had complications.
Compared
to the intoxicated group, where it was only around 30%.
So fewer complications in the alcohol group.
Fewer complications reported during the acute hospital stay, yes. So it's possible that acute alcohol use somehow changes the patient's clinical course enough, maybe through that immune modulation or other effects, to reduce common post-TBI complications like pneumonia or infections.
And fewer complications would naturally lead to better functional status scores at discharge.
Exactly. It would contribute to a better acute outcome picture.
Okay, that's one angle. What else? You mentioned biases.
The big one. The massive issue is potential patient selection bias. Remember, this study was limited only to patients who survived long enough to actually have an alcohol test reported in the emergency department.
So if someone had a devastating TBI, maybe made worse by alcohol and died very quickly.
Right. Died in the field or immediately upon arrival before labs could be drawn and resulted.
They wouldn't even be in this study sample.
Precisely. They'd be excluded from the analysis. This naturally skews the results toward survival for the alcohol-positive group, because the alcohol-positive patients who did make it into the study were already, by definition, the ones who survived that initial, most critical phase. It's a classic survivor bias.
That seems like a really crucial limitation.
It is. It's a major methodological limitation inherent in many retrospective trauma studies.
Okay. And finally, what about the time frame? This entire study is just a snapshot of acute outcomes, right? Status at discharge.
Exactly. It only measures how they were doing the moment they left the hospital. They lacked critical premorbid data, too.
Like what?
Like a patient's prior history of alcohol use where they're chronic heavy drinkers, or their baseline cognitive reserve, how healthy was their brain before the injury. These things could hugely affect long-term recovery.
Right. So better short-term function at discharge doesn't necessarily mean a better quality of life 6 months or a year or 5 years down the road.
Absolutely not. We're talking strictly about immediate survival and acute functional status right at discharge, not the overall long-term trajectory of recovery, which is arguably much more important for the patient's life.
Okay.
The authors themselves conclude that the exact nature of this outcome relationship is complex, it's multifaceted, and it really requires future experimental human studies that incorporate robust long-term follow-up to understand the full picture.
Okay, this has been a true deep dive, really mapping out the risks and this very complex picture of acute recovery. Let's quickly summarize the main takeaways for you, the listener.
Yeah, let's boil it down.
Okay, first, the demographics of severe TBI risk are sharply defined. High rates in young and middle-aged men, particularly peaking between ages 31 and 50.
And MVA, motor vehicle accidents, while not having the highest rate of alcohol involvement per se, is the dominant volume driver of alcohol-related injury just because there are so many MVAs overall.
Got it. Second key takeaway.
Second, targeted prevention efforts show promise. Particularly policy changes like lowering the legal BAC limit demonstrate tangible success. We saw that downward trend in alcohol involvement among MVA cases, and specifically in the 18 to 30-year-old age group.
Proof that interventions can work.
Yes.
And third, the relationship between acute alcohol use at the time of injury and the short-term TBI outcome is, well, profoundly complicated.
Yeah. It shows a consistent statistical association with higher survival rates and better functional status scores right at hospital discharge.
But, and this is a huge but.
A huge but.
Yeah.
This finding is heavily nuanced. You have to consider the potential for survivor bias in the study design, and also the potential, still speculative, biological role of alcohol, perhaps acting as an immunomodulator, maybe dampening that initial harmful trauma response.
So definitely not a simple picture.
Not at all. And the need for future research is crystal clear. We have to move past just looking at acute status at discharge. We need to clarify the biological mechanisms and, crucially, use long-term outcome measures to truly understand what recovery looks like for these patients months and years later.
Absolutely. And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. We saw that alcohol-related TBI risk often peaks between midnight and 4 a.m., that classic window. But we also saw that specific age groups, like those 31, 50-year-olds, have unique risk windows, like earlier in the day for MVAs.
Right, those different patterns.
So the question is, what if prevention resources were allocated more effectively, not just globally, but thinking hour by hour and age group by age group, to try and preempt these very specific injury alcohol profiles before they happen?
A much more tailored, time-sensitive approach to prevention. Interesting idea.
Something to think about. Until the next deep dive, keep learning.